The unseen star. Imagine scrubbing the floors of the White House at midnight, invisible to the world, while the most powerful people in the country walk past you without a glance. That was Leonardo DiCaprio's life. Yeah, that Leonardo DiCaprio. But not the movie star you're thinking of. This Leo was a janitor, a guy who blended into the shadows of Washington, D.C. with a mop in his hand and a secret nobody knew. Until one night, everything changed in a way that'd make your heart stop. It was a chilly Tuesday in D.C., the kind of night where the Potomac River fog creeps into your bones. The White House was buzzing, staffers rushing through the West Wing, phones ringing, aides arguing over policy briefs, and coffee cups clutched like lifelines. Leo was on his knees, cleaning a marble hallway near the Roosevelt Room, when he heard a frantic voice. A Chinese diplomat, lost in the maze of corridors, was trying to explain something in broken English to a stressed-out intern. Leo, without even looking up, called out in perfect Mandarin, "Calm as you please. Sir, the briefing room's 2 doors down on your left." The diplomat froze, stared at this guy in a faded gray jumpsuit, and nodded, stunned. But that wasn't the crazy part. Leo turned back to his mop, then switched to Spanish to help a delivery guy find the service entrance. A minute later, he was guiding a French aide in flawless French, pointing her to the right elevator with a warm smile. Nobody noticed, nobody except one person. President Elizabeth Warren, stepping out of a late-night meeting, stopped dead in her tracks. She'd been to Beijing, Madrid, Paris, and she knew what she'd just heard wasn't normal. Not from a janitor. Leo didn't see her watching. He was too busy, head down, doing what he'd done for 15 years, cleaning up after the powerful, staying invisible. But Warren wasn't just any president. She had a knack for spotting what others missed. She walked over, her heels clicking on the floor Leo had just polished. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp but curious. Leo looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yes, ma'am?" "That was Mandarin, wasn't it?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Leo nodded, no big deal. "And Spanish and French." He shrugged. "Yeah, I pick up languages. Helps pass the time." Warren's jaw tightened, not mad, but hit with a pang of something heavy. Guilt, maybe. She'd spent years preaching about American talent, opportunity for all, and here was a guy mopping floors who could outtalk half her diplomatic team. "What's your name?" she asked. "Leonardo DiCaprio," he said, no trace of pride, just truth. "Leo's fine." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Leo, you got a minute to talk in my office?" His face stayed calm, but you could tell he was thrown. Nobody ever asked him upstairs. He nodded slow, like he was waiting for the catch. They walked to the elevator, the air thick with silence. Leo glanced at his reflection in the polished doors, a guy in a janitor's uniform next to the President of the United States. "Been here 15 years, he said quietly as the doors closed. "Never thought I'd see the Oval Office." Warren gave him a small look. "Things change fast around here. What do you think it's like to be invisible your whole life, then suddenly have the spotlight on you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious what you do in Leo's shoes." The weight of a chance. The elevator dinged, and Leo stepped out onto the plush carpet of the White House's executive floor. The air smelled like polished wood and old books, a world away from the bleach and damp rags he knew downstairs. President Warren led him into the Oval Office, where a massive desk sat under a window framing D.C.'s glowing skyline. Leo stood there, still in his janitor's jumpsuit, feeling like he'd walked into someone else's life. "Sit," Warren said, pointing to a leather chair. He hesitated, then sat, his calloused hands folding in his lap like they didn't belong. "Leo," she started, leaning forward, "I heard you flip between 3 languages out there like it was nothing. How does someone like you end up cleaning floors in my building?" Her voice wasn't accusing, it was real, like she actually wanted to know. Leo looked at the floor, then back at her. "You got time for the truth?" he asked, half smiling. Warren nodded. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't." He took a breath, like he was dusting off memories he hadn't touched in years. "Grew up in Pittsburgh, just me and my mom. She worked double shifts at a diner, barely kept the lights on. I was a kid who loved words. Taught myself Spanish from library books, French from old tapes, Mandarin from a neighbor who ran a takeout joint. Got a scholarship to Georgetown for linguistics. But life, it don't care about your plans." His voice cracked. Just a little. Mom got sick. Cancer. I dropped out to take care of her. After she passed, I had nothing. No degree, no money, just a kid to raise on my own. Warren's face didn't change, but her eyes were locked on him, taking in every word. Your kid? She asked softly. Leo nodded. My daughter Emma. She's 24 now, a teacher in Baltimore. Stubborn as hell, just like me. He chuckled, but it faded fast. I took any job I could, warehouses, gas stations, then here. Cleaning steady, pays the bills, keeps me close to Emma. He paused, staring at the presidential seal on the rug. The languages? I never stopped. Kept learning, Arabic, Italian, you name it. It's the only thing that makes me feel alive. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the world's holding its breath. Warren leaned back, her fingers tapping the desk. You've been here 15 years, and nobody knew this? Leo shrugged. Nobody asked. They see the uniform, they assume. That word, assume, hung in the air like a challenge. Warren felt it hit her like a punch. She'd built her whole career on giving people a shot. And yet, the most gifted guy she'd met in years was wiping down her hallways. Leo, she said, her voice steady but warm, have you ever thought about doing more? He looked at her, not suspicious, but careful. Sure, but dreams don't pay rent. Warren smiled just a little. What if they could? She grabbed a notepad and scribbled something, her pen moving fast. Leo tilted his head. What's that? An idea, she said, looking up. A big one. Has someone ever seen something in you that you didn't see in yourself? Tell me about it in the comments. It's those moments that change everything. A leap in the dark. Leo stood in the Oval Office, his janitor's jumpsuit feeling tighter by the second, like it was trying to pull him back to the life he knew. President Warren put down her pen and looked at him, her eyes sharp but kind, like she could see right through to the guy he used to dream of being. Leo, she said, I'm creating a new role. Cultural liaison for global affairs. Someone who can bridge languages, cultures, people. Someone who can make the world listen. I want that to be you. Leo blinked, his heart thumping so loud he swore she could hear it. Ma'am, I mop floors. I don't have a degree. I've never even been in a meeting that wasn't about cleaning schedules. Warren didn't flinch. You think I care about a piece of paper? You spoke 3 languages in my hallway before breakfast. You've got more skill in one conversation than half my advisors. Her voice softened. You've been invisible too long, Leo. It's time to step up. He shifted in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests. Why me? You don't even know me. Warren leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Because I saw you solve problems out there without asking for a pat on the back. Because I'm tired of talent like yours getting buried under assumptions. Leo swallowed hard. He thought of Emma, his daughter, teaching kids in Baltimore, fighting her own battles. He thought of his mom, who'd worked herself to the bone so he could dream. And he thought of himself, all those nights reading foreign newspapers under a flickering kitchen light, holding on to something no one else saw. Okay, he said finally, his voice steady but raw. I'll try, but I'm not promising I won't mess this up. Warren smiled, a real one this time. You won't, and if you do, we'll figure it out. She stood motioning to the door. Come with me. Minutes later, they were in a conference room down the hall where a group of flustered aides was scrambling to prep for an emergency meeting with a trade delegation from Tokyo. Their translator had bailed, and the room was chaos. Papers everywhere, voices overlapping. Warren nodded at Leo. You're up. He froze for a split second, then stepped forward, his work boots heavy on the polished floor. In flawless Japanese, he greeted the delegates, his voice calm and warm, like he was inviting them into his home. The room went quiet, shoulders relaxed. The lead delegate smiled, nodding back. Leo didn't just translate, he made them feel heard, respected. When the meeting ended, one of the Japanese officials shook Leo's hand and said in English, You're better than any interpreter we've had. Where have you been hiding? Leo glanced at Warren, who was watching from the corner, her arms crossed, a proud glint in her eyes. Right here, Leo said softly. Just right here. Have you ever been thrown into a moment you weren't ready for but ended up shining? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear how you surprised yourself. Whispers and doubts. Leo walked out of the conference room, his heart still racing from speaking Japanese to a room full of suits who actually listened. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not just as a guy with a mop, but as someone who mattered. President Warren gave him a nod as they headed back to the elevator, her voice low. You did good, Leo. Real good. But as the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of two aides in the hallway, whispering, their eyes flicking toward him. He didn't hear what they said, but he knew that look. Doubt mixed with something sharper, like envy. By the next morning, the White House was buzzing with a different kind of energy. Word had spread faster than a DC summer storm. The janitor, Leonardo DiCaprio, was now some kind of hotshot liaison, handpicked by the president herself. Leo clocked in early, still in his old work boots, heading to a new office on the third floor. A small room with a desk, a window overlooking the National Mall, and a plant that looked fancier than anything he owned. He stood there staring at the view, feeling like he'd snuck into a life that wasn't his. His first task was a stack of reports from Chicago suppliers and a contract for a Miami trade deal, all needing translation into Spanish and Portuguese. Leo dove in, his pen moving fast, his mind sharper than it had been in years. But then the door swung open, and in walked Clara Hensley, a senior advisor with a Texas drawl and a stare that could cut glass. She didn't sit. Mr. DiCaprio, she said, her voice cool, I hear you're the new golden boy. Care to explain how a janitor lands a job like this? Leo set down his pen, meeting her gaze. I speak the languages, ma'am. I get the job done. Clara raised an eyebrow, tossing a folder on his desk. These are from Berlin. Messy contracts, been stalled for months. Think you can handle it? Leo nodded, calm but firm. Give me a day. She didn't smile, just left, her heels clicking like a countdown. That afternoon, Leo overheard more whispers in the break room. 15 years cleaning toilets, and now he's in meetings with Tokyo, one staffer muttered. Another shrugged. Bet it's just Warren trying to look inclusive. The words stung, but Leo kept his head down, translating those Berlin contracts line by line, his hands shaking not from nerves but from something deeper. Anger, maybe, or the weight of proving them wrong. By evening, he'd finished, and Clara had to admit the work was flawless, but she didn't say it out loud. Leo didn't need her to. He thought of his daughter, Emma, who'd called him that morning, her voice bright. Dad, you're doing what you were always meant to do. Don't let him dim your light. Those words carried him as he locked up his office, the DC skyline glowing outside. But deep down, he knew this was just the start. People like Clara weren't done testing him, and the whispers weren't going away. Ever had to prove yourself to people who already decided you don't belong? Drop your story in the comments. I know I'm not the only one who's felt that sting. The fire within. Leo sat at his new desk, the DC skyline twinkling through the window, but the glow felt far away. The Berlin contracts he translated were a hit. Clara Hensley had sent them to the German embassy without a word of praise, but Leo didn't need her approval. He'd felt the fire in his chest, the same one that kept him learning languages in a cramped Pittsburgh apartment all those years ago. But the whispers in the White House halls were getting louder, and they weren't just whispers anymore. People stared when he walked by, some with curiosity, others with a smirk that said, "Who does this guy think he is?" That morning, President Warren called him to a meeting in the Situation Room. Leo walked in, still feeling like an imposter in his borrowed blazer, and saw a table full of heavy hitters, advisors, diplomats, and a delegation from Atlanta working on a tech trade deal with Seoul. The translator was late again, and the room was a mess of frustration. Warren looked at Leo. "Can you handle this?" she asked, her voice steady but expectant. Leo nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped into the chaos, speaking Korean so smoothly it was like he'd grown up in Seoul. He didn't just translate, he explained cultural nuances, cracked a small joke that got a laugh, and turned a tense room into a conversation. The Atlanta folks were nodding, the Koreans were smiling, and Warren's eyes sparkled with something like pride. But not everyone was impressed. Later that day, Clara Hensley cornered him in a hallway, her arms crossed. "You're good, I'll give you that. she said, her Texas accent sharp. But this job needs more than party tricks. You got no credentials, no experience. You're a gamble, Leo, and gambles don't last in D.C. Leo kept his cool, but his voice had an edge. I'm not here to play games, ma'am. I'm here to work. Those soul contracts? They're moving forward because of marriage. Clara's lips tightened, but she didn't argue. She just walked away, leaving Leo with a knot in his stomach. That night, he sat in his tiny office, staring at a photo of his daughter, Emma, on his desk. She'd sent it last week, a picture of her with her students in Baltimore, all smiling wide. Leo's eyes stung. He'd missed so much, her school plays, her graduations, because he was scrubbing floors to keep her fed. Now, for the first time, he felt like he was becoming the man she deserved to call dad. But the doubts crept in. What if Clara was right? What if he was just a flash in the pan, a janitor playing dress-up? Then his phone buzzed, a text from Emma. Dad, you're my hero. Don't let them make you feel small. Leo's throat tightened. He wasn't doing this just for himself anymore. He was doing it for her, for every kid like them who grew up with nothing but a dream. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and headed out into the D.C. night, determined to prove he belonged, not just to Clara, but to himself. Have you ever felt like you had to fight twice as hard to prove your worth? Tell me about it in the comments. Your stories keep me going. A door opens. Leo walked through the White House at dawn. The hall's quiet except for the hum of early staffers and the faint scent of coffee drifting from the West Wing. His new role as cultural liaison for global affairs was starting to feel real, but the weight of it pressed on his chest. Every day he faced new challenges, contracts from Los Angeles, calls with London, emails in Arabic about a Chicago trade summit. He handled them all, his languages flowing like water, but the whispers never stopped. Some called him Warren's pet project. Others said he'd crash and burn. Leo didn't let it show, but each jab cut deeper than he'd admit. That morning, President Warren called him to her office again. She was standing by the window, the Washington Monument sharp against the sunrise. Leo, she said, turning to him, you're making waves. The Seoul deal's moving forward, and I got a thank you note from the Korean ambassador himself. Said you made them feel like family. Leo nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Just doing my job, ma'am. But Warren wasn't done. I'm starting something new, a program to find talent like yours, people the system's overlooked. I want you to help build it. Call it Hidden Voices. Leo's eyes widened. Me? I'm still figuring this job out. Warren's gaze didn't waver. Exactly why it's got to be you. You know what it's like to be invisible. He thought of the nights he'd spent cleaning these halls, unseen, unheard. He thought of his mom slinging plates in a Pittsburgh diner, and Emma teaching kids who reminded him of himself. Okay, he said, his voice steady but thick. I'm in. Later that day, Leo sat in on a meeting with a delegation from New Orleans, negotiating a cultural exchange with Paris. He spoke French so naturally, the room felt like a conversation between old friends. When it ended, one of the delegates pulled him aside. Man, you're the real deal, he said, clapping Leo's shoulder. Where'd you come from? Leo chuckled softly. Just the basement of this building. The delegate laughed, but Leo's words hung heavy. He was starting to see it. His story wasn't just his anymore. But not everyone was cheering. Clara Hensley called him to a private meeting in a cramped office on the 5th floor. She sat across from him, her Texas drawl icy. Leo, you're good with words, I'll give you that. But this hidden voices idea? It's a PR stunt, and you're the poster boy. Don't get too comfortable. Leo leaned forward, his voice low but firm. With all due respect, ma'am, I'm not here for the spotlight. I'm here for the people who've been ignored, like I was. You can call it a stunt, but I call it a chance. Clara's eyes flickered, caught off guard, but she didn't reply. She just slid a folder across the desk, reports from Miami, needing translation by morning, and left. That night, Leo stayed late, the White House dark except for his office light. He opened the folder, but his eyes drifted to a note from Emma, taped to his monitor. You're changing the world, Dad. Keep going. His chest ached, not from pain, but from something bigger. Hope. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who'd ever been looked over, everyone who'd ever felt small. and he wasn't about to let Clara or anyone stop him. Have you ever fought for something bigger than yourself? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear what drives you to keep going. A hero's light. Leo stood in the White House rose garden, spring breeze gentle, his heart thumping like a drum. Launching hidden voices to uplift the unseen, he felt every eye on him. President Warren spoke, voice steady. Leo DiCaprio proves what's possible when we truly see. His daughter Emma shone in the crowd, her smile outshining DC's sun. I was a janitor, 15 years, Leo said, voice raw. This is for everyone who's felt invisible. Cheers roared, some wiping tears. Clara Hensley, once icy, said later, I was wrong, Leo. You're real. Hidden voices transformed lives, a Philly guard now a translator, a Miami worker coding. In New York, Leo's speech to global leaders won a standing ovation. Emma called, voice breaking, Dad, you're everyone's hero. Once unseen, Leo was now a beacon. Ever felt invisible, then found your light? Share in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that touch your soul.